Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well-being. I'm your host, Minaa B, a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self-awareness and self-efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. Hello. Welcome back to Mindful with Minaa. I'm your host, Minaa B. And before I jump into today's episode, I just want to remind you all that we are a few weeks out from the Reframe workshop. So if you live in New York City and you want to join me in person for a powerful, intimate experience where you learn the power of reframing your thoughts, reframing the roles that you play, maybe even today's episode will resonate with you and you want more hands-on, actionable tools to walk into the new year, setting a new intention, I encourage you to join me on November 15th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in New York City. All of the information is in the description box. And I just want to add, please remember to rate and review this podcast. So I want to talk about something that I see in my work a lot, which is the habit of being everyone's emotional caretaker. I specifically see this with women, but maybe if you are a man and you're listening to this, you might find yourself resonating with it as well. Or this can be an opportunity for you to look around in your friendships or even your family dynamics and see the ways emotional caretaking plays a role in how you show up in your relationships with women or even with men. So I want you to reflect and think about times where you find yourself absorbing other people's stress, managing other people's feelings, solving everyone's problems, or even trying to smooth over conflict. And you may not have realized this, but you're playing a role that was likely shaped long before adulthood. So this episode is going to break down why emotional caretaking happens, the family and sibling dynamics that establish this role, the fear that comes when we stop caretaking, and I'm going to provide you with concrete strategies for breaking this cycle. So why do we become emotional caretakers in the first place? Because caretaking can feel natural, especially for people who grew up in environments where emotional safety wasn't reliable. It can also be deeply rewarding. But there's a fine line between healthy empathy and chronic emotional caretaking. Emotional caretaking usually develops in early life as a coping mechanism. It often comes from one or more of these dynamics. First, it can be growing up in families where emotional needs were unmet and you stepped in to meet them. So you were a parentified child. Maybe you had emotionally unavailable or emotionally absent parents, and that can happen. Being the eldest child or sibling and learning that responsibility meant survival. Being in households where emotional expression was unsafe, so you became the translator of feelings. Even being praised for being mature or helpful, which reinforces a sense of self-worth tied to meeting other people's needs. Over time, caretaking becomes a habit, an unconscious pattern that can carry into adulthood. I also want to highlight how our family and sibling dynamics act as a relational blueprint. If you grew up in a home where emotional labor was unevenly distributed, you may have internalized the role of emotional caretaker without even realizing it. For example, in families where a parent struggles with emotional regulation or emotional availability, a child may naturally step into a soothing or mediating role for themselves or even for their siblings, and sometimes even for their parents. If you were the eldest child, you may have been expected to look out for your younger siblings, and that sense of responsibility becomes part of your identity. Even in healthy families, sibling dynamics can create patterns where one person is seen as the peacemaker or the strong one, and these are roles that often extend into adulthood. Now, I want to share that these roles aren't inherently bad, they're survival strategies. But the problem is when they become our default way of relating to others and when we start to confuse self-sacrifice with love. So why is it so hard to stop being everyone's emotional caretaker? I believe that underneath this caretaking is fear. It's the fear of being abandoned if you stop fixing things, fear of losing control over relationships, fear of being seen as selfish or uncaring, fear that without you, the people you care about won't be able to manage, and fear that you won't be considered a worthy or valuable participant in your relationships because you find worth and value in your caretaking. This fear can keep us stuck in caretaking patterns, even when it drains us emotionally and physically. But here is a truth I want you to hold on to. When we over caretake, we often rob others of their own growth. By solving problems for them, we prevent them from learning to navigate them on their own. And it ends up having an impact on our mental health, but also the relationships we exist in. Being an emotional caretaker can feel noble, but it comes at a cost. It comes with emotional burnout and compassion fatigue, resentment toward the people we care for, losing sight of our own needs and desires, even codependency, where our sense of worth depends on being needed, and difficulty in forming balanced reciprocal relationships. A study in the Journal of Family Psychology showed that chronic caretaking is linked to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and stress-related illness. I want you to think about that list I just shared. Do you relate to that? Do you find yourself experiencing emotional burnout and compassion fatigue, even resentment toward the people that you care for? Because if this resonates with you, I am going to share some ways that you can break the cycle, because breaking free from this role takes awareness, courage, and consistent practice. So here are a few strategies that I recommend for you. The first one is to name the pattern. Awareness is always the first step. Notice when you're stepping into fix or manage someone else's emotions. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or obligation? Also ask yourself, am I avoiding my own discomfort by focusing on others? Because that's a common thing where sometimes we feel very inclined to fix other people's problems because we have problems in our life that we feel can't be fixed or can't be managed, or we're just trying to avoid because it feels so uncomfortable, and it's just easier to focus on the needs of others and problem solve for other people instead of problem solving for ourselves. So I want you to do some reflecting there. The second thing I want you to do is set emotional boundaries. Remember that boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges to healthier relationships. So instead of saying to someone, let me handle this for you, or I'll take care of it, try to reframe your approach by saying, I hear you and I believe you can handle this, and I'm here to support you if you need me. Allow people to find their own power, but also let people know that you're there to support them. You're going to be on that journey with them, but also that you have hope that they can get through this, and that they have the ability to problem solve for themselves as well. So learn to practice saying no without guilt. Remember that boundaries are about protecting your energy so that you can show up in sustainable ways. And not being the person who problem solves immediately doesn't mean that you're not a good friend or a good sibling or a good family member. It just means that you are managing your boundaries. It means that you're managing your energy and you're practicing sustainable ways to show up in that relationship. It's okay to allow people to figure things out on their own. Another thing that you have to learn to do is practice letting go. Caretaking often comes from a need to control outcomes. I see this so much in the work that I do as a therapist. A lot of us struggle with control. And I want you to understand that there are going to be so many things in life that are outside of your control, but we learn so much about ourselves when we submit to the process. So practice allowing others to take responsibility for their own feelings and decisions. This might feel uncomfortable at first because growth for both parties comes from discomfort, but I believe that you can do it. So you have to do the work of believing that you can do it. The next thing I want you to do is build your own emotional self-care plan. If you're always caretaking for others, that means you're probably neglecting your own needs. So I want you to take some time to create a self-care routine that supports your own emotional health, whether it's journaling, going to therapy, exercising, trying that new Pilates class, doing a meditation, or, engaging in certain creative outlets like going to a pottery class or a dance class. Tend to your own needs. There is an episode that I did on joy planning. So I encourage you to start asking yourself, what does joy planning in my own life look like? Have I taken the time to figure out what are the things that bring me joy and how can I start planning for it? So I encourage you to listen to episode 52 if you want to start learning how to joy plan so that you can break free from this caretaking role that might involve self-neglect. And always remember the importance of caring for yourself because that is how you care for others. The next thing I want you to do is work on self-validation because sometimes caretaking comes from tying your worth to others' approval. Work on validating your own worth independent of what you do for others. Affirmations like, my value is not determined by my usefulness, or I deserve care and compassion as much as anyone else, can be a great starting point and work as an emotional anchor to keep you grounded in what it looks like to validate yourself. The last thing I want to share is that maybe seeking support is what you need. Therapy or support groups can give you a safe space to practice letting go of the caretaking role and to explore the fears underneath it. So I want to leave you with a thought. When we stop being everyone else's emotional caretaker, we give ourselves permission to live authentically. We reclaim the space to care for ourselves, to nurture relationships that are reciprocal, and to show up fully without losing ourselves. Caretaking is a form of love, but when it becomes the only way we relate, it becomes a mask. True love includes boundaries, trust, and allowing people to carry their own load. So if this episode resonated with you, I want you to try one thing this week, practice saying no to something that feels like emotional over responsibility. Notice how it feels, reflect on it, even journal about it. Breaking free from being everyone's emotional caretaker is not a one-time decision. It is a process. So be patient with yourself on this journey. Every step you take toward that freedom is an act of self-care and self-respect. So thank you so much for listening to Mindful with Minaa today. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend and share it with someone you think needs this. Share it with somebody who you realize, maybe it's my mother or my sister or my aunt or even a close friend. I find that they engage in a lot of emotional caretaking and I think they need to hear this episode. So please share it with your community. I also ask that you rate and subscribe to this podcast because it helps my show grow and your support is so special to me. I also share with you different ways that you can continue to learn from me. So right now my book, Owning Our Struggles, is on sale on Amazon for $15.99. So if you have been waiting to grab my book and you have been waiting for a sale, now is the time. You can head to the description box where I have a link to my book. I have a link to my newsletter so that you can stay in touch with me and continue to learn from me. And most importantly, I have a link to the Reframe Workshop where you can join me in person on November 15th. So remember to take care of yourself with the same compassion you give to others. Until next time.